Thank you guys for joining us today. And a super special thank you to all of our new members. Welcome to the community. We're so grateful that you're here. My name is Jess Murphy, and I'm a community manager here at Kunik. Kunik is an inclusive community of working caregivers where members can share their personal experiences with each other, while also availing themselves of resources that we have, like community discussions, coaching sessions like this, as well as learning libraries of lots of critical topics for parents and caregivers alike. So Kunik aims to meet all caregivers where they are right now and to help them grow together with the support of our community and to be the best that we can collectively. This month, February, is Black History Month, and we are thrilled to open this peer network session to our partners and our friends for what we feel is a very important discussion. We have a wonderful Kunik coach with us. Hello, Ebony, you can give a little wave. Ebony Lewis. So she's here to lead us today in the discussion about why race and representation matter. By day, Ebony is the Director of Leadership and Service and Health and Wellness for the Boys and Girls Club of Greater Milwaukee. Her greatest passion and source of pride comes from her work as a youth warrior, a mental health advocate, and an author, where she inspires youth to achieve their dreams with passion, mental wellness, and love. I'll turn it over to Ebony, and we are so excited to have her and all of you here. Guys, if anything comes up in terms of questions, please feel free to use the chat. You can do it anonymously, or you can do it so everyone can see. But I'm here to lead the way, so let's get started with Ebony.
Awesome. Thank you for that introduction, Jess. And then thank you to the Kunik family for inviting me to be a part of this coaching session and to lead in this wonderful topic that I am very passionate about. If you can't already tell and hear, I'm extremely excited about this topic. And I mean, one, because I am a Black woman, I grew up and dealt with a lot of different things. And then I think as I grew and learned what my purpose and passion was in life, I felt that it was to share and to help others and really inspire others. A lot of that came from my youth work. Of course, I felt, in working with youth, I was able to share with them and teach them and coach them and pour into them. But then most of those youth would leave me and they would go home. And so if their parents weren't getting that same information, if their parents weren't getting that same coaching and love and support, then those students will come back to me and kind of need a refresher or a restart every time. And so I've extremely become passionate about sharing my message with adults and parents specifically. And so I'll go ahead, share my presentation. Can everybody see the presentation on the screen? Awesome. And so once again, I am here to talk about why representation matters. I also have a few things in here that hopefully will help and serve as tools and resources for how to have and start some of these conversations with our students, with ourselves, with our partners, just to really ensure that we're properly representing folks in the home. And then of course, when our students and we go out into the world, we have that. So once again, this is me. I know it's kind of redundant to have this slide in here, but this is me. I like to keep this in here though, because I'm always very specific about how I describe myself. I share this with the youth that I work with. A lot of times we're always used to hearing people say things like, I don't see color, right? And I always like to teach how that is very demeaning. Because I want you to see me. It's when we don't see people, it's when we don't see their differences that we deny them access to resources, that we deny them access to opportunity. So I want people to see me. I am a Black woman. I'm a wife. I'm a mother. I'm an author. I'm a youth warrior. Mental health is something that I'm passionate about. I'm a CEO, right? I want those titles to ring true to me. Now our students and our children can look and say, the VP, right? The vice president looks like me. So it's important that we see that color and that we have those reflections. Just a little bit about the book, because I am an author and I'm really excited about my book. I wrote and published it almost 2 years ago. It's so crazy how fast time is flying. But the title of the book is Dear Black Boy, It's Okay to Cry. It's a book that was inspired by my family, a very personal story. I lost my cousin to suicide in 2016. And it was at that time that I recognized that there was a silent cry for help in my own family, but in our nation, in our world, all too often because of bias, because of discrimination, because of microaggressions, right? Men and boys don't feel comfortable speaking up and asking for help, being vulnerable, sharing how they're feeling. And I thought it was really important that I write a love letter to my family that became a love letter to just about anybody who, hopefully picks up my book and reads it, letting them know that it's okay, letting them know that it's important to get help. And while the title is Dear Black Boy, It's Okay to Cry, this book is for everyone. And that's a part of what I'll talk about today, is how we can take books that are Dear Black Boy and still read them to anyone and share them with everyone. One, because the message applies to us all, but then two, because that representation is so important. I, of course, want to start with safety first. I feel like even when we're having uncomfortable or courageous conversations, it's important to remind folks that this is a safe space. We're all here learning. We're all here becoming more aware, and we're growing. You don't know what you don't know. And so it's okay to be uncomfortable. Like race, really comfortable topics. And so it's okay to be uncomfortable. What we have to learn to do is embrace that uncomfortability and move through it, right? Move through that. And I always remind to move through it with love, right? I have my love shirt on today, if you all can see. That's my motto, move through things with love. I did want to add some language in here to consider, because we are talking about race, right? Specifically Black History Month. One of the things, the Kunik family and I talk about a lot of times, we just kind of have those struggles with, I don't know how to say this, or I don't know if this is right or wrong. Once again, just ask. I've learned that when it comes to language, everybody has a different preference, right? There are some things or some terms or some phrases that one person might prefer and the other person might not. I'm one of those people where if something offends me, I'm okay with saying, you know what? I didn't like that, or that was offensive, or you know what? I would prefer if you use this language. But just wanted to kind of start with that so that you all feel comfortable, you feel safe, and know that this is a space for us all to learn and to grow, and not to judge or put anyone down. If you have any questions about this, once again, please use the chat, let me know. And then Jess and Liz, while I move through this, if anything comes up in the chat, feel free to kind of just wave, let me know, and I can stop and talk to that. So I wanted to start with one of my favorite quotes. So I guess I already started. So continue with one of my favorite quotes from Nelson Mandela. And that is, no one is born hating another person because of the color of his skin or his background or his religion. People must learn to hate. And if they can learn to hate, they can be taught to love. For love comes more naturally to the human heart than its opposite. I always like to begin with this when we're talking about things like race, because it's that reminder of why representation is so important. Many times when we think about the teaching of hate, when we think about the teaching of bias, it seems very intentional. Like I'm gonna wake up and I'm gonna teach you to do this. But what I've learned is, especially with race, a lot of it is unintentional. We grow up in our communities, and I shared with the Kunik family, I work for a private high school here, and I lead a lot of their DE&I efforts. And, it's in a suburban neighborhood, it's a private school. So a lot of times we're in our small siloed communities with the people that we know, that look like us, that talk like us, that walk like us. We watch certain TV shows, we read certain books. Right?
Race and representation matter.
Oh, I'm sorry. We read certain books, and indirectly we teach ourselves things without even trying. And so we have to learn that in order to learn and really embrace other cultures, we have to open that community. And sometimes opening that community is inviting folks in, but it's also researching, educating, reading books, watching movies. Because sometimes that's the only representation that we can get. If our children are going to school where all the children look like them, then it's our job to ensure that we're giving them proper representation of other cultures. And they're not just getting that from a television show that may misrepresent someone. So I always think this is really, really prominent in the work that I do, and really important in letting it be known why representation matters. When I talk a little bit more about my book and why Dear Black Boy, a part of that is because I believe that education, right, is like the number one key and to awareness. However, if our children aren't being properly represented, how can we teach them better, right? If we don't have the proper resources. And so I think it's, interesting. This, of course, was in 2018. I do think that the 2019 stats have been released. So forgive me for not having those in here. But this was published by the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and it highlights diversity in children's books. And so as you see, 50% of books feature white characters, 27% feature animals or other representations, and then 10% African American and Black, 7% Asian Pacific Islander and Asian American, 5% Latinx, and 1% American Indians and First Nations. So as you can see, still lots of strides to be made. But that's why it was so important for me to, one, write my book, but then also use my platform to show why it's so important to encourage the next generation to write more books, because that, I think, is the greatest way to influence and educate and bring awareness to folks, is through education. And I will share, and I think I shared this quote on one of our check-in calls. When we think about education, we many times send our children to schools and then we expect them to come back with all of this knowledge. However, I learned very early on that we are our children's first teachers. So it is our job to educate them. It's our job to seek these resources, to seek these books, to find things that can really help and support them in having these conversations and talking about things like race and racism, and really ensuring that they're learning things. I started my day with a group of young ladies, and they shared with me, Miss Ebony, well, that's what they call me, it's Black History Month. And, we only learn about Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and Rosa Parks, and we want to know more about young Black influencers. And then I asked them if they knew that the Lieutenant Governor of Wisconsin is a Black man. The first lieutenant governor, the first Black lieutenant governor of Wisconsin, right? He's a man that I knew growing up. And so it's really important that we're sharing these things with our students. And a lot of times I think we expect the outside world to do it for us. And it's really important that we're taking that initiative and really teaching them. So next, what I have are just a few reasons why diversity in media, specifically books, movies, and different things matters, especially in homes and communities where you may not have a ton of diversity or representation. One, it allows you to see yourself represented in a story and explore your identity. I always share, growing up, I was a Disney kid, and I loved watching, all of the princesses. My favorite was Beauty and the Beast. And from having a loving mother, I always knew I could be a princess, right? Or I was beautiful, or I was loved. But if I did not have that mother or father reflecting that, I may have looked at that as, well, none of the princesses look like me. So maybe that's because that's not a life that I'm able to live, or I'm able to attain. I'm not able to attain love or wealth or, being saved, right? These ideologies that those shows or movies can reflect. And so it's really important that, Tiana came along. I was 20 at that time, so I was not a child anymore, but I was just as excited as if I were when they introduced Princess Tiana, and now a long, list of different movies and things have been made to have that representation. It brings visibility to cultures different from our own. So if we are living in communities where we may not have that exposure, it's extremely important that we're watching certain movies, that we're reading books, even if those books don't reflect people that look like us, because that may be the one touch point that our students have with learning about different cultures and learning about them in a proper way. Because I'll let you know now, they're going to learn about the culture in one way or another. You want it to come from a space of love, from a space of truth, and not a space of misconception based on what they may see in the media. Reading builds community and unity and inclusivity. We all, I hope, like to read or love to read, but it's one of those things where it brings forth a sense of community. I know lots of different organizations and groups that in this time during the pandemic, created virtual reading spaces to read books, to have those tough conversations about race matters and social justice issues. And so it's really important that we have these spaces to do so. It creates openings for discussions about what's happening in current events. So if you're ever struggling and you're like, I don't know how to have this conversation with my youth, I don't know how to have this conversation in the home, books and media are great ways. Watching a specific documentary, reading a specific book, even at very young ages, there are books. I just read with my 18-month-old, almost 18-month-old, this morning. Bell Hooks has a book called B-Boy Buzz, and it's an older book about being a boy of color. But we read that, and it's very short and sweet and simple. And he flipped through the pages with me and pointed, right? And it's just that reminder and that reflection of him on the pages. It's really important that he's seeing that. It emphasizes similarities. So kids are kids, no matter how different their backgrounds. I always mention even, movies like Trolls or movies that remind us that differences matter and they're important and they mean something to us. It's really important because a lot of times our kids, they know that stuff, right? They go out in the world and they will embrace and love and play with everyone, right? Because we're all kids and we all like to play and we all like to laugh. But then as they grow older, many times those unconscious biases or that other information is ingrained in them. And then that's when you kind of see the shift and they start to question things. They start to question if they should play with this person or talk to this person. So it's really important that we're allowing them to really see how similar we are despite our differences and understand our stories and how they intertwine. And then lastly, racial and gender differences in media have a huge impact on a child's self-esteem. It's important that little girls of color are seeing themselves represented in politics right now, right? Because if not, once again, you think that that's a lane that you'll never venture into or you can't or you won't. So I think all of those things kind of bring home why it's so important that we have diversity in media and that we have these conversations.